Alhamdulillah, we are now live on YouTube, Facebook as well, I believe. So welcome to those who are waiting. We apologize for the slight delay in going live. Alhamdulillah, we are repeating things for you at home or you are watching on the YouTube live stream. Welcome to our history class. So today is a class on the Mamluk era of Islamic history, which we'll talk about today and more about that, inshallah ta'ala. This is one class of many classes we do on Saturday mornings of Islamic studies. We look at purification, worship, fiqh issues. We look at the Quran, the tafsir. We learn about the Quran, the life of the Prophet ﷺ, which is now extended into Islamic history. The Khulafa al-Rashidun we've covered, the early Muslim empires of the Umayyads, the Abbasids. And alongside the Abbasids, we've now come to the Mamluks. And we'll move on, inshallah, in our future classes to the Mughals and the Allahumma salli sayyidina Muhammad, the Ottomans, inshallah ta'ala. We'll finish with the Ottomans, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, bismillah. So I've got a PowerPoint here in front of me, which you should be seeing as well, right? So we'll move into today's class, which is about the Mamluk dynasty. So where does this all come from? What happened in this time in the world? We were saying earlier that the Abbasids weren't really strong leaders. Other dynasties, other groups arose to defend the Muslim lands and support the Islamic Empire. Among them were the great Salahuddin Ayyubi and Nuruddin Zingi, rahmatullah alayhima. Nuruddin Zingi was first, and he defended the Muslim lands from the Crusaders and took back some of the main cities of Aleppo and Damascus and other cities. And eventually he passed away, but along came Salahuddin Ayyubi, who was sent to Egypt, and he established the dynasty, and the leadership really became established in Egypt. He came back to Damascus, so he was from originally those lands. He was said to be Kurdish from those lands. But Egypt still remained quite a focal point, and it's actually where the Ayyubi dynasty took charge and leadership. So his descendants, Salahuddin Ayyubi's descendants, were leaders of the Muslim world in the sense that they had control over Makkah, Medina, and the central Islamic lands, and they were based in Egypt, Makkah, Medina, Damascus, and these heartlands of the Islamic Empire, Jerusalem included. But again, like any dynasty, they became weak. The leadership became luxurious. They didn't follow in the footsteps of their forefathers in the struggles they had, and it resulted in a decline. But at the same time, something really, really extraordinary and brutal happened at the same time. Was nothing to do with the Muslims necessarily, and it was the Mongols. Okay, the Mongols came about at this time, right? So what happened is highly connected to the Mongols and the rise of the Mamluk dynasty. The Mongols, as a whole of history, were going around the world and just taking over land. And they weren't conquering land to take over the world. They were just, it was part of their nature just to go fight. They had battles with the Chinese, the Ming dynasty, and all these kind of major battles. You can read that history. All over Central Asia, where Muslim lands were now being conquered by these nomadic people of the steppes, the same kind of people as the Turkic people that had gone to support the Abbasids would become Muslims. Later on, some of the Mongols became Muslims as well, by the way. Taimur, one of the leaders of the Mongol Empire, he was a Muslim, and he fought the Ottomans, by the way, right? There was a big fight between Bayezid, one of the Ottoman leaders, and Taimur, and the Ottomans won. Battle of Ankara. We'll look at it later, inshallah. We'll look at the Ottomans. 1402, I think it was, a big battle between the Ottomans and the Taimurids, they were called at that time, because he was the leader of the dynasty, and he was a Muslim as well. Although some say he took Islam to get the following and this side, we're not here to judge, but he was known to be a Muslim. So these people, to go back a bit, were non-Muslims initially. Genghis Khan is the famous kind of leader who arose to bring the people together. He went through some amazing stuff. He saw the killing of his father. There's many legends and stories about him. You've probably seen films, I don't know. He's a true person. His offspring, his grandchildren became Muslims. He wasn't a Muslim. And so he was leading these armies, and later on other leaders as well. Kublai, and there's few names that come around. Tamerlane, that's Timur, and his other sort of offspring and so forth. And later on, these Mongols actually produced the Mughals, right? So there's a whole history, we have to talk about the Mongols, they're important, but initially they weren't Muslims. So when they reached the Muslim lands, they basically, like they did with anyone else, won the battles, brutally killed people. So they didn't have this idea of forgiveness or mercy or, we're going to conquer the lands and we're going to establish a society. We're just basically pillaging, killing, massacring, and moving on. That's all it was. They were nomadic people. They didn't settle in one place, but they were very strong. They had a system in place, a tribal system, very good warriors on horseback, archery, but they had their neighbors, the Turkic people as well. And the Turkic people, as we said, from the Seljuk Empire, from others, the Ghaznavids, had embraced Islam, a large portion of them, right? And they were the ones that were taken also into the Muslim lands to serve the Muslim armies. So the Ayyubid dynasty, the Zengid dynasty, had utilized these people. The Seljuks were these people, the Ottomans were these people. So they were now, from initially, so it's important to understand this, initially the soldiers of the Muslims were Arabs, because it was from Arabia, majority of the Muslim fighters were Arabs. Later on it spread to the Persians. The Abbasids actually used the Persians. Abu Muslim al-Khurasani from Khurasan, who helped the Abbasids into powers, Persian, right? So the Abbasids kept that tradition. The first sort of 100 years was mainly Arab fighters, although others were there. It was mainly Arab tradition or Arab fighters, just say, and the Arab kind of, they're coming out of Arabia. Then it became the Persians, and also if you go into Africa, the Berbers. So these were more the people, the Northern Africans, and other not just the Berbers, there was many people. And as you expand, obviously, subcontinent and other places, but the next ethnicity, if you like, of people that became Muslims and fought for Islam or as Muslims were the Turkic people, the Kurdish people, these people who lived around Persia, who were probably Persian as well, by the way, because parts of Persia goes into those lands. So there's Turkic people who speak Turkish and Persian. I don't know if you know this. If you go to parts of Iran, there's people who speak Turkish or Turkic language that they can go to Turkey and speak with the people in Turkey. They can also speak Iranian or Persian with the people of their country, because they have that tradition. They're from a Turkic background that moved. So there was no Turks in Turkey, by the way, 1,000 years ago, right? It wasn't a land of Turkish people. It became that due to what we're going to talk about today. And that was the Turkic people who were in Central Asia, the steppes, as it's called. And they were, brought into to fight in the armies. When the Mongols came to attack the Muslim lands and ransack them, and Baghdad happened, and it mentions that here, right? In the notes some of you have, it says a Mongolian war lord named Temujin, Genghis Khan, through diplomacy and war, had managed to unite all the rival Mongolian tribes. He was crowned the great ruler Genghis Khan. He and his descendants proceeded to conquer territory in each direction, carving out the largest continuous land empire in history, which they didn't even care about. They never had this idea, right? But they did. If you look at history, they had the largest land empire, right? Meaning they conquered the most amount of land, which is Central Asia and around it. They didn't make their way into Europe. That was the Ottomans, right? They carved there, and the Muslims in Spain, right? We talked about that. So what happened eventually was the ransacking of Baghdad. So they arrived in Baghdad, they attacked, Mu'tasim, who was the leader, the Abbasid Caliph, put up a fight. He was told to surrender. He didn't surrender. Eventually, it led to a destruction of the whole city of Baghdad. Thousands of people were killed brutally. They threw all the books away. So they didn't just kill people. The rivers were flowing with ink because they were throwing the books away. That the golden era of the Abbasid Empire, of this, sciences and disciplines that had happened over the last few hundred years, was a lot of it was lost. Right? A lot of it was gone. People were killed. Nobody was spared. You read in books that people were hiding in carpets and rugs just so that they wouldn't get noticed. They were staying there for days until these people had left Baghdad and gone. So it was a very brutal attack and killing. What had happened was the Muslims had gone weak. They'd gone away from their deen. They weren't ready to fight anymore. Who is ready to fight? Those Turkic people. The Seljuks were doing it, but they also had wars with the Mongols as well. You can look at the Seljuk-Mongol Wars. There were several of them. You can look at their history as well. And they weren't successful either. The success came from another group of Turkic people in Egypt, okay? And these people were the soldiers of the Ayyubid army. They were the soldiers of the Muslims. And they were slave soldiers, as you can see there, it says slave soldiers, right? They were soldiers that were brought in as slaves, freed and made into soldiers and trained, became Muslims, some of them were not even Muslim as well. But they had a loyalty. Slaves, they said one slave is better than 1,000, non-slaves, because they had loyalty to their masters, those who'd freed them. And these people became sincere to the cause, okay? They were looked after, they were respected, they were taught, they were educated. Slavery was not known like that in the rest of the world. Islamic concept was to free slaves, was to educate them. The Prophet said, clothe them with your clothes, feed them with your food. Slaves are not just a commodity like they were treated prior to Islam. They're human beings, and give them that self-respect, dignity, and educate them. And if they're Muslims, let them pray and fast and whatnot, right? And educate them and allow them to be human beings. So the slaves in the Muslim Empire were really honored people. It was honor, it wasn't a blemish. And many of those slaves became loyal servants and warriors of the armies, right? So this was the concept that had come around. It says this, if you go on in the slides, it says it. It's in the books as well. There's pictures of the Mamluks, by the way, just from random places. So this was the Mamluk dynasty, which we'll come on to, right? So the map of the Mamluk Sultanate orange. They start from Egypt and they went to the Muslim lands. There were two dynasties, the Burji and the Bahri. Burji means the tower. Bahri means they were near the river or the sea. This is the Bahri dynasty. The map of the Sultanate orange under Burji dynasty ruling 389. That's wrong. It's this one. The name Bahriya means of the river, referring to the location of the original statement. So we're going to come on to this in a second. This is the I want to get to. It says, one loyal slave is better than 300 sons, for the latter desire their father's death because they want to take on the role of leadership, while the former desire their master's glory, right? So this was the loyalty of the slave. They weren't slaves in the sense of they were literally there in chains. They were freed people. Some were freed slaves as well. They weren't even in slavery or bondage. Others were under the title of slaves, but they were actually given the full freedom to do what they want, learn, study, education, but they wanted to serve their masters. They were honored by their masters. They wanted to stick to their master. Many a scholar was a slave, and once their master freed them, Abdullah ibn Umar had a slave called Nafi. He freed Nafi. Nafi is one of the greatest scholars of Islam. He's a teacher of Imam Malik. He said, I don't want to leave you. I want to stay with you. You're a companion. I want to learn. So he studied with his teacher and learned from him, and he became one of the narrators of Bukhari, Muslim, Muwatta. He narrated to Imam Malik, the golden chain of Imam Malik, Nafi. Abdullah ibn Umar, the Prophet ﷺ, is one of the most authentic chains of hadith narration. From who? From Imam Malik, the great Imam Malik. From Nafi, who's a freed slave. From Abdullah ibn Umar, the great companion, to the Prophet ﷺ. It's one of the most authentic and it's called a golden chain of hadith narration. So these slaves were honored and they wanted to stick with, he was freed. He wasn't a slave, he was freed. He wanted to stick with his master. These people came now to the forefront because they saw the weakness in the Muslim leadership. So literally a group of these soldiers came together. They had their leaders, generals, commanders. So some of these people got up to commander level, general, etc. But they were always under a caliph, a leader, and they always followed their command. Now they became independent because they saw the need that, wait a minute, the Mongols have just been, ransacked Baghdad and they couldn't defend themselves. Who's going to defend Egypt? These leaders aren't going to do much. We need to make sure we're in the right position and do the right thing at the right time. So they took over Egypt, as you saw in those two previous slides. They took over the land. These are just random kind of diagrams, maps. So the blue part is the Mongols. Okay, so the Mongols, as you can see, have taken over Persia. They've taken over Baghdad. Now they're coming for Damascus, Jerusalem. They're going to come to the Muslim lands. Makkah, Medina are under risk, right? Where do these people emerge from? Cairo. They're based in Cairo, and they take over from the Ayyubids, who was in charge before them, the offspring of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, okay? 1250 to 1382 CE Common Era, that's the Bahri. The Burji and the Bahri are two different ones, right? But they're the same people. They're just two eras of the Mamluk dynasty. Rise of the Mongols is mentioned here. You don't have this in your book, so pay attention to the screen. Made this animation. So that's said to be Temur in the background. Got little pictures of him there, right? Wikipedia is very helpful. So this is how they started off, 1206, right? This is how they were coming. They weren't anything to do with the Muslims until they obviously started hitting the Muslim lands, as you can see. If you know your maps and your geography, you know that, wait a minute, they're into Persia, they're into Iraq there, right? They're into the Seljuk Empire. Now they're coming even closer. They're in Pakistan in that one, right? They're in China on that side. So they were really dominant. And as time went on, 1259, they were they were actually in parts of Europe, right? So the Caucasus and in Russia and whatnot, and the Balkans, they did get there, right? The caliphate collapsed. The caliphate collapsed in actuality. We mentioned this, but we will later on. The Mamluks we're talking about, they took over and kept the caliphate. So just like before, where the Seljuks, the others would lead, the Zengids, Ayyubids, they never abolished the Abbasid caliphate. Okay, they kept them as caliphs. But at this time, the Mamluk said, we'll keep you as caliphs, but really just as a symbol and nothing else. You don't have no armies, you don't have nothing. You just have, we'll give you basically somewhere to live, and we'll respect you as the Abbasids, and we'll have a caliph from among you who's a leader, etc. But really the whole control now went all the way to these people. They took over from them. And this continued even during the Ottoman time, and then even there was, and during the Ottoman time, they took over from the Mamluks and the Abbasids and took over Makkah and Medina, which we'll come on to later, inshallah ta'ala. But you can see where they took over. This is where they started from, okay? This is Egypt today, right? And this is the map of that part of the world. They started from there. They knew the Mongols were coming, so they had to make a change. Right at the top, if you can see it, it's on your screen, it says the Ilkhanate. Right, top right, you can just about see on the big map, it says Ilkhanate. That was the name of the title for the Mongol Empire, right? Sometimes they call it Ilkhanate as well. They had their own different regions and names as well. Who were the people? I'm talking about these Turkic people, the leaders, they came forward. It says here, there was two great men, leaders. They were these soldiers in the armies. They rose up. The leader was Qutuz, but the general in command who led the armies was Baybars. Okay, so Baybars, Al-Zahir Baybars, something Qutuz, they got their names. These were names of the people actually, right? Their actual names. And Qutuz was the official leader, but he sent Baybars as the commander of the army. They were leading the Mamluks against the Mongols, and they are taken over as the leaders from the Ayyubids. So the Ayyubids are now gone. Okay, Ayyubids are no longer there. These slaves, they were free slaves. They became leaders, married into the Ayyubid family, I believe. They married one of the offspring of Salahuddin Ayyubi to show that they never had this animosity to others. They always wanted to have lead. It was political kind of thing, right? They always wanted to have leadership and the confidence and the public, vote, public opinion in their favor. So they became very powerful. They took over as, custodians of the Kaaba, Makkah, Medina, and supporters of the Abbasids. They kept them, like we said. So we talked about the Mongols and the Tatars, right? So what happened now? We go to the battle itself, right? The Mongols marched upon Jerusalem, or towards Palestinian lands, right? You can see there in the map, Jerusalem's there. And there's a place called Ain Jalut. That's the place to really pay attention to. Ain Jalut. That's where it all happened. The Mongols actually went through some challenges themselves. They had a few. I think the Mongol emperor leader passed away, so some of the people went back. The actual Mongol leaders that were going to attack the Muslims, like they said, why were they doing it? For people ask the question, why did the Muslims go around the world? Why did the Mongols go around the world? Just because they were good at it, right? Nobody knows some of the answers to these questions. But they came to the Muslim lands. They'd already taken Baghdad. They'd already gone into the lands. You can see where they are. They came, but they were somewhat weakened. However, they were still a force that had never been defeated. Right? They were just a really, really brutal force that anybody they'd come in front of had fallen. This was their first defeat. Their first defeat was by the Mamluk forces of Egypt at that time. So they marched towards Jerusalem, beyond Jerusalem, towards a place called Ain Jalut, and that's where this battle occurred. Had the Muslims lost this battle, it was over. We don't know what would have happened in Islamic history. The Makkah and Medina would have been taken, the Kaaba destroyed, how many Muslims killed, who was going to stand up and fight? Would it be, the Muslims of Africa that came into it? Who knows? They had their own challenges as well, by the way. But yeah, the center land, the heartlands, Makkah, Medina, Jerusalem, Damascus, Cairo, Egypt, these were massive, massive, massive Muslim populations. Even today, the biggest Arab country in population, Muslim country is Egypt. Although Indonesia, India, Pakistan have, Bangladesh have more Muslims as a population. At that time, there was a massive, this was the heartlands. So what happened? They met, and nobody expected, there was really, again, the odds were against the Muslim forces. Okay, they met at a place called Ain Jalut. Ain Jalut, Ain means a spring, and Jalut is named after Goliath, right? And it was like a David and Goliath battle. Some even say, the history kind of reports, it was like basically befitting, because it was like, David and Goliath, right? Where Goliath is this big, massive warrior, and David defeats him, etc., right? The Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, etc. But Allah alam, whether it occurred there or not, whatever, it was befitting. They say it was, the same thing happened. The army led by Zahir Baybars, Qutuz was the leader, but the actual one who won the battle was Baybars. Qutuz was then treacherous and actually killed Baybars. Baybars had been a leader, he'd got everything done, he was the military general, number one. But Baybars was, Qutuz was killed, which way around was it? I can't remember. I think Qutuz killed Baybars and took over, brutally. So this is what happened: politics, leadership, get your main competition out of the way. We'll see in the Ottoman Empire, it was crazy. They were killing each other like galore just to get leadership, right? It was the thing that happened, unfortunately. It's called fratricide. Fratricide is when you kill your brother to get leadership. So there's 3 princes. If you kill the other 2, you get to be the leader, basically. That's what happened in the Ottoman Empire a lot. We'll talk about that later. But here it just happened on this occasion because Qutuz realized that I can have power fully over the Mamluks and the Muslim lands and be in charge. He's my main opponent. He's the main guy who's got the kind of thing, the authority as well. So he took over basically, and he became the leader of the Mamluks. So they stabilized the central lands of the Muslims for several hundred years, actually. A few hundred years they were leaders, but their stabilization continued further on into many generations and centuries, really, until there was other things that came about. Right? What came about after that was the sorry, this is the battle. I didn't show you the battle. Here's Baybars and Qutuz, right? So here's some animations of it, right? So these are some diagrams, right? What happens? This is what happens. So the army of the Muslims was bigger, by the way. The army of the Muslims was bigger than the army of the Mongols. But still, the battle, they actually suffered. They were about to lose, actually, by the way. So they weren't on the upper hand. They were on the back foot. Baybars got involved himself. So these 2 generals, they were fighters. They were soldiers, remember. They got involved themselves, and they were big warriors. They were experts and stuff, right? So they actually helped win the battle themselves. They were a big part of the victory physically themselves. Usually the leader just command. These were actually involved themselves firsthand, like Salahuddin Ayyubi. But his offspring weren't like that. You see, the offspring always usually take a step back and let others fight. The same thing happened. People get involved themselves. They take first-hand action. They end up being victorious. So what happened was the Muslims attacked, and this is what happened. They got drawn back. They pulled in the Mongols. Then what happened? All of a sudden, the Muslims that were hiding, the Mamluks, they came out of the forest, the hilly areas, and attacked from both sides. So you see the Muslims were larger in number. They came around and got them, held in, and literally destroyed the army and won a massive, unexpected victory, because they were losing initially. They were on the back foot, but they had a strategy which allowed them to take over and win. In terms of their timeline and what they did, there was developments in terms of knowledge, sciences, architecture. So there was a lot of, if you go to that part of the world, you'll see a lot of red dome buildings, small red dome buildings, like a little red dome and a building underneath. These are either small madrasas, small masajid madrasas, schools, where the Mamluks were taught, where the Mamluks were educated, where they lived, trained, masajid for them. And there's many of these. If you go around like places like Cairo, Egypt, Damascus, and other places, you'll see this. They had this tradition of being taught there. They weren't built by them, they were built for them, but they continued in that tradition. So Salahuddin Ayyubi was very educated and learned. The Mamluks were as well. These were not just random soldiers who were really brave warriors. They were actually educated, right? They knew Islam very well. They were taught a level of piety as well through knowledge, obviously. they had practice as well. But like any era, like any dynasty, there is a timeline for it, right? There is a strong point and a weakness. And the Mamluks led, they had certain leaders, their leaders are mentioned, but they became weak as well. And there was other problems that arose. Mongols were still there, by the way. Mongols didn't disappear overnight, but they did get pushed back. Something was invented and found, and it was called gunpowder. Okay, so technology was changing. The Mamluks never got into that. There are three major empires, dynasties that took on the gunpowder. They call the gunpowder dynasties, or gunpowder, empires, I think. What are they? What are these three? Anybody know? What are the gunpowder empires? Anyone know what the gunpowder empires are? Anybody watching at home?
Chinese?
No, not the Chinese.
Qing Dynasty.
Ottomans are one of them. So Ottomans are one of the gunpowder empires. Okay, who are the other two? We're going to study two of them. We're going to look at all three of them, but study in depth or to some level. The Ottomans and the Mughal Empire. Thank you, Kamran. So the Mughal Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and what was the third one? So the Mughals were in the subcontinent. The Ottomans were in Anatolia, which is now Turkey today, as we all know it. There were some people in the central lands. So they were in Makkah, Medina. That was the Mamluks. So Mamluks had Makkah, Egypt. Ottomans are going to be in the north, in Turkey and those regions. The subcontinents with the Mughals. There was the Delhi Sultanate, and then it was the Mughals. So the Mughals took over. Persia, exactly. Who was in charge of Persia? Well done. So the Persian lands, there was a dynasty that was in the central Persian lands. It was one of the gunpowder empires. It was called the Tang. No, that's Egypt. That's more farther east. We're talking central, talking Uzbekistan, talking Iran, these places, Turkmenistan, those central Asian lands, if you like, very much Central Asia. No, nobody knows the name of this empire that arose. It was called the Safavids, or the Safawiyun. The Safawiyun, in English, they call the Safavids. Again, very powerful empire that fought against the Mughals a little bit, but more so against the Ottomans. And they were closer to the side of the Mamluk. So they had Mamluk battles, they had Ottoman battles. The Ottomans and the Mughals were Orthodox Muslims, Sunni, normal Muslims, Mamluks as well. The Safavids started off, if you look at the history, as Sunnis, but they were influenced by Shiism, and that's why into the world today you find Shias in Iran, in those central areas, because they became a Shia-based dynasty. So hence they had hostilities with the Ottomans, with the Mamluks, and then they tried to make truces and allies and to fight. So it was a bit of a triangle. Mamluks fighting, were Turkic people fighting Ottomans, Turkic people. They went with each other. They had some exchanges, but the major exchanges were with the Safavids, right? And the Safavids were also with the Mamluks. There was stuff going on, and there was little bits here and there, or the little groups around. It wasn't just these three. And on the other side, you had in the subcontinent the Delhi Sultanate, which had certain little groups. They study as part of Indian history. It's also part of Islamic history because they were Muslim leaders and Muslim empires. And then the Mughals came, and the Mughals were the descendant of the Mongols, right? Babur, we're going to look at Babur and him going to from Central Asian lands. He couldn't get leadership. He tried to follow. I think he was the grandson, a great grandson of Taimur, or great grandson, which is a few hundred years on from the Baghdad and what happened there. And the Mughal dynasty rose. So this was happening at this time now. So we're moving along the timeline of history. So we're now in 600 AH, 700 AH, 800 AH is where we're looking at right now. About those times is when we see the rise of the Ottomans. We see the Delhi Sultanate turn into the Mughal Empire. We see the Safavids arise. The Mamluks start to disappear slowly, and then eventually they're gone as well. So I'm just going to read from the booklet we have. It says, The new era. The Mongol invasion had caused chaos in the Muslim world, China and Europe. Like we said, the Eastern Europe was also affected. However, like all the other powerful nomadic warriors, their powers began to wane as they split up into different factions and many times became absorbed into the territories that they ruled. Although the Mongols left destruction and chaos wherever they went, three powerful empires would arise from the turmoil. Okay, these empires would carry the Muslim nations into the modern era, to the 19th, 20th century. Their decline would shape and impact what we know today as the Muslim world, meaning when the Ottomans went, we had the Arab countries and the Republic of Turkey. When we had the Mughals disappear, we had India, Pakistan, and all those things that happened, right? Bangladesh and all that. When the Safavids disappeared, we had Iran, we had these other countries, Afghanistan and whatnot appear. Before that, there was just these three empires that were controlling those parts of the world, right? The Mamluks were there for a bit, but the Ottomans took over from the lands of Egypt. So Egypt has a big Ottoman influence. If you go, there's Ottoman architecture. Even the Taj Mahal was influenced by one of the Ottomans. So the Ottomans and the Mughals worked together. Like I said, they were Sunnis, they support each other. Even they are known to have sent doctors from India to the Ottomans to help them in some of the wars. Architects were sent from Ottoman Empire to the Mughal Empire to help. Taj Mahal was said to be designed or helped in this design by an Ottoman architect. So there was an exchange there between, a positive exchange between the Mughals and the Ottomans, right? So we look at that, inshallah ta'ala. So before we set the stage for the last three powerful dynasties, sometimes referred to as the Gunpowder empires, one finally notorious Turco-Mongol leader would be mentioned, who's known as Taimur. Because Taimur wasn't part of the early Mongols, but he was a Mongol. He was a descendant of Genghis Khan, is said to be. And he embraced Islam, or he was a Muslim. So he says, unlike the early conquerors from the Eurasian steppes, those Central Asian lands, was a Muslim. Unlike them, he was a Muslim. From his base in Samarkand, modern-day Uzbekistan, he carried a new and fierce wave of expansion. He was attempting to recreate the empire of his supposed ancestor Genghis Khan. He conquered Persia, India, Sham, Iraq, Anatolia. Seljuks were defeated and Ottomans exchanged. Defeated the Mamluks and set his eyes upon China a few years before his demise. Like his predecessor, he left behind chaos and murder wherever his armies conquered. So there was a Muslim, was just going about killing everyone, including Muslims. Also, like his predecessor, did not leave any type of coherent and centralized government. So like I said, the Mongols never left behind a system or leadership or anything. They just came and went. This factor would ultimately lead to the eventual breakdown of the Timurid dynasty, okay? Except for one individual, Babur, right? Timur's great-great-grandson, so great-great-grandson. Babur would set up one of the greatest empires of his age, the Mughal Empire of India. But he tried to establish leadership in the central lands to revive his forefathers' leadership, but he couldn't find support and leadership, so he just left for India, basically. And it was too hot for them down there, so they didn't want to go there. But he went there, he took over from the Battle of Panipat, I think it's called, right? And the Sayyids, the Lodis, I think, against the Lodis. We look at Delhi Sultanate, which was these different, the Sayyids, the Lodis, and a few others. And the battle that Babur came and took over from them in our next class, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so that will be our next class, which is the Mughals, right? Over in those of you who are on our course, we'll see that over the next page is the Mughal Empire. That's what happened. So now with the scene is set, we've got the Mamluks in Egypt and the central lands of Makkah, Medina. We've got the Mongols in central Asia. We've got the Seljuks in the north, now weakened by the Mongols. The Mongols are there. And we've got Babur. So we haven't got to the stage of the Gunpowder Empire, just before that, right? Now, when Babur goes, the Mongols are waning away. And as Babur goes to India, subcontinent, along comes the Safavids. They were spiritual people initially, and they took over. Along comes Ertugrul, Ghazi, we'll talk about Ertugrul the week after, and his son Uthman, and then the Ottoman Empire. And again, during that phase, the Mamluks, who carried on, along with the Abbasids, by the way, they carried on. They kept them as the Khulafa. They tried to support them. They became very weak compared to the Ottomans, right? And the Safavids. in Central Asia, Iran. And the Ottomans took over to defend, because otherwise the Safavids were taken over. So the reason some people criticize that the Ottomans took over from the Mamluks. They fought then, they were both Sunnis. And why did they do that? Because they saw the threat of the Safavids. They took over, and then they declared the caliphate for themselves. Some say they wanted caliphate. Basically, there was no longer an Abbasid caliph. And for the first time, there was a non-Qurayshi leader of the Muslims, if you like. Some say, no, it was still with the Quraysh. So there's a big debate whether or not the Ottomans are a caliphate or a sultanate. Because the Prophet said, Al-Umara'u min Quraysh, the leaders are from Quraysh. The Abbasids were Quraysh. Hence, this was one of the reasons why all these other small dynasties, Ayyubids, Zengids, Mamluks, they never took out the Abbasids because they were the rightful leaders on paper. On the ground, it was otherwise, but they didn't take it that away from them. When it came to the Ottomans, we'll see there was no longer an Abbasid element left, and it just became the Ottomans. But they were officially the leaders of the Muslims, defending the two holy lands, and so forth, right? And we'll look at that, inshallah ta'ala, next time. Any questions for today? So those of you watching benefited from this. You tuned in from home. This was just a lesson. Maybe out of context, so you haven't done the history before this, but you could see where it fits in terms of the Islamic timeline. We showed you a few slides where it was after the Ayyubids, right? Salahuddin Ayyubi and his Islamic revival had gone. His offspring dwindled away. Who came along? The Mamluks. And these Mamluks existed long before then, right? They were already around, they were already part of the armies, but they were just soldiers. Now they took the leadership. And some people opposed that, by the way, said, no, slaves can't be leaders. So they brought the Abbasids. They said, no, the Abbasids are leaders, we're just the armies, and the actual on-the-ground control was with them. There was a Mamluk dynasty or a Mamluk era in the Indian subcontinent as well. So the Mamluks of that land. Again, similar concept. Those that had gone there as slaves had been freed, now saw their time to take leadership. There was a Mamluk dynasty in that time as well. There were others as well, which we look at now. When we look at the Mughals, we'll show how Islam in India in general was taken there. Time of Sayyidina Umar, time of the Umayyads, time of the Abbasids, leading up to the Mughal Empire. So we'll kind of go back in history a little bit to give you context to how Islam reached the subcontinent and how it then became the Mughal Empire, which lasted until the British came, the Eastern Company, and they did what they did. And that was the end of the Mughal Empire, and that was the end of that, and it became India, Bangladesh, or East Pakistan, West Pakistan, then Bangladesh, Pakistan, and then whatnot. So we'll talk about that. We'll go all the way up to the British coming in, taking over. We won't go into too many detail. There's a lot of detail, loads of detail. What they did, the famines. They starved the people of India in some places. Right, they didn't give them food. They made Muslims fight Muslims. There was a shooting of some Muslim soldiers because they didn't want to fight against Muslims, so they fought against the British, like reprisal against the British. This is what happened, right? So we will have a look at that next time, inshallah ta'ala. I believe we have a sister who's going to, for everyone watching, hopefully we wanted one of the students to share a few words about the classes that we've been having for the last 25 weeks. This is week 25, I believe, of our classes. So this is one of 25 of 25 or 27. We've got 2 more weeks left, inshallah ta'ala. And it's been a journey for all of us. Some of us, you joined during some of the units or sections we were studying, like Islamic history. Some of you have been with us from the beginning. Alhamdulillah, it's been amazing. It's very sad we're not in person and sitting together. Normally we have these convos in person and we talk face to face or screen behind screen. We have got screens in the center. But we can't do that because of the rules. We are looking to invite you back after Ramadan for a session where you'll get your certificates, or you'll get presentations, where we'll have a final class, if you like, our ceremony, inshallah, and have nice food and gifts for you all, inshallah ta'ala, as well. Don't worry, we're looking after you. But before then, if I could ask Sister Farida, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Sheikh.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, Sheikh. How are you?
I'm well, alhamdulillah. If you don't mind, if you just say a few words of your journey to Isnad, to the classes, how you've learned, benefited, and maybe a few words of encouragement for others. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I just wanted to speak a little bit about my journey. Before I signed up to foundation year this year, I attended a short course at Guidance Hub last year before the lockdown. And what really struck me was the atmosphere amongst the sisters. There was a lot of, it was clear that they shared like a lot of love and a bond between each other. They look forward to coming to these Saturday mornings, and what really connected them was coming together for this cause. And it was that journey together that really bonded them. So seeing that, I signed up for the foundation year. Initially, I was apprehensive at how basic my Islamic knowledge was, but alhamdulillah, I saw that everyone was at the same stage. People from different backgrounds and different ages, all together for that same purpose. The teachers were really friendly and welcoming from the start. The staff do everything they can to make you feel comfortable. And they even adapted to, when we had COVID lockdown, to bringing this teaching online, which was really, really beneficial. I think in a world where everything's at your fingertips, where you can learn everything online, the importance of a course like this, where you learn the essentials of your faith by qualified and experienced teachers firsthand and in person, is really understated. In terms of the material, my favorite modules has probably been the spirituality modules, the journey to Allah in term 2, which helps you learn about fear, hope, patience, gratitude, reliance in Allah, and other things. COVID has emphasized to a lot of people how essential these things are, and learning how to apply them in day-to-day life and what the balance should be in each of these aspects was really enlightening. I really just wanted to speak to encourage any sisters who might be thinking about signing up, because I think brothers sometimes can gain a sense of brotherhood and spiritual enlightenment from attending the masjid for prayers and gatherings, but few sisters really have that luxury. And I come from outside of Manchester area, so it's a rare opportunity for me. And Guidance Hub provides a safe and respectful and friendly space for sisters to learn, and having a female scholar on site is invaluable. So anyone who is able to just spare a few hours a week to attend, I would highly recommend it, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much for that, Sister Farida. I just emphasize, we have 2 years, so those that are already in year 1 will be signing up to year 2, and in year 2 you get to study with Sheikh Khan, our female teacher. Like Farida said, mashallah, she's an inspiration to us here at Guidance Hub. She leads the way. She's hardworking, committed, mother of 3, mashallah. I know her husband, he does the babysitting, mashallah. He's a brilliant husband, mashallah. Allah bless him. But it allows someone like Sheikh Khan to serve the community and the ladies immensely, and to have her and to have that guidance firsthand is invaluable. You should really take the opportunity to sit in her company and benefit from her. We do try to bring her into year 1 in some sessions, but because of her schedule and timetable and other classes that she's doing, mashallah, very busy, it's not easy to build everything in. But in year 2, you get to study with her firsthand. Ladies, it's separate. We break the brothers and sisters separate, and you study in with her privately or in personal space. And also, I'd like to say that we have a variety of subjects that our goal was to empower Muslims in what they need to learn. Not just make it all exciting and nice and advanced courses, which sometimes can miss the mark with what Muslims need. We've taken feedback on, so Islamic history was feedback, and we thought it's essential in the sense that it gives us inspiration when we learn about our history and where we came from, and it gives us that identity in a sense that we didn't know, this was our history. And it's very brief. What we do, to be honest, is very brief, because I've studied history over a few years in my studies in Damascus, and I know all the not all the details. I know several major events and details, and I wish I had the time to share those with you. But it's really amazing to know this is our history. We were at such critical stages in our past, and to be here is not a product of the last 10, 20 years. It's over 1,000 years. Us being in Manchester, you being where you are, having massage in the UK, praying 5 times a day, or just knowing what Islam is amazing, and we should cherish that and respect that a lot. Islamic history really helps you to see some of that, and it's quite interesting and very, very engaging, I think, personally. My favorite subject is the seerah, right? So I like that Sister Farida mentioned this is spirituality. I like spirituality, but for me, the life of the Prophet ﷺ and then the history onwards is it really gives you a sense of understanding, belonging, attachment to this tradition of Islam. And often we don't know that. Earlier today, a brother asked about a good book on Seerah. I'm mentioning that we have a book on our website that we can sell to you, inshallah. You can have a look and order it. But it's a basic book. But he was asking, is there any bigger books and we can expand on the Seerah and look at the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't know which ones to get out there, this, that, the other. Alhamdulillah, when you come to the classes, it's totally different. Like I said, we've studied over many years that we can break down the Seerah with explanations from the scholars, contextualize every aspect, answer your questions, because it's a lot of things to take in and understand. And reading is helpful, but not always enough. Ayaz, Assalamu alaikum. What's your favorite subject, Ayaz?
Assalamu alaikum. I think the prayer one is a lot of things that had masala that I didn't know, especially I think from the prayer one, I'm making more approach and more careful how I'm doing my prayers now, and a lot of just daily changes just help me a lot.
So you're right, there's very practical stuff in the prayer one. We practice literally every day. Can I ask, how have you found the courses and how has that helped you, in your life?
I've personally probably changed the way of life, like the way I look at things differently now, and especially how I speak to people. Just you're more like concerned about your own deen, and you're concerned about where you're going to head. So just more conscious, and since I've been on the course, I've stopped a lot of maybe doing the wrong things. So first thing, I stopped listening to music. So I'm trying to away from as many things as I can, but slowly progress. But this is a start, I guess, just to hopefully to their journey, inshallah.
Thank you for sharing. And just maybe in a few words, why would you recommend the brothers, because we had the recommendation of the sisters, why would you recommend the brothers to sign up to the course?
I would recommend to our brothers because it gives you a sense of a routine, especially coming in every Saturday. That's one good start. And then there's a lot of things we have to do on a day-to-day basis that we really don't know about. Something that could be as small as from your prayer, for your rosa, anything we totally neglect. And we should, it's our duty to learn. And we saw Fardul Ain, as they say, to learn our basic, Islam knowledge. That was the main goal, and hopefully if everyone else can benefit from it, that'll be very helpful for your own life,
Exactly.
I guess. It's not for anyone, for your own self, and obviously it'll benefit us in the hereafter.
I think you mentioned a very good point there, and I'll share this about myself. I studied for myself, and I benefited for myself, and that's what it's for, that you will do this for yourself. That's the intention you have to make. That, Ya Allah, I'm doing it to be a better servant to you, but be a better person. Help me through this, right? It's really for, and it's not, when I did that, I did it for myself. Now, when I started my journey in learning, I wasn't married, no children. I didn't have responsibilities at home. You're young, your dad's looking after everything, right? But soon that changes. Soon I got married, I had children. I was like, okay, wait, life is coming fast. But alhamdulillah, when you learn the deen, you kind of prepare for that stuff. I was living with my family in Syria alone. We lived for there 4 years. You become more responsible, but learning the deen helps you to grow as a person yourself, and then you can give back to others. And I know some people on the course, they're learning and they're going teaching their children. They can go and have conversations with their families and talk about Islam in a more enlightened and deeper way. I know some of like the various ages of people, they go and have debates and discussions. They tell me that we have these debates. What were discussions we had at your class? And can you clarify this point? We end our debate basically facing the Qibla, the prayer. If you don't, and so like you said, some of the fiqh issues come up. People talk about Islam, and that's the beauty, that you're taking Islam home. You're taking positive conversation home, something related to the Prophet ﷺ, something related to your prayers. So it's just not coming to the center or to the class. It's actually a whole way of life, a whole positive effect on your life. So alhamdulillah, thank you for everyone for sharing, for those who did. Just to mention, it's not an online course. So if you're watching online and you're thinking to just sign up online, it's not an online course. It doesn't work online. It does work that we're doing this online. We resort to this, like Sister Farida said, we had to move to the online option and the virtual learning. But really our courses are designed and really work best when it's in person. So if you can, and people come from as far as West Yorkshire, Blackburn, Preston, We've had people come from Stockport. Stockport's not far. We're just off the M60, Heaton Park. You can get here from most places within an hour. So we've got a good reach. We get people from a large contingent from Bolton, Oldham, mashallah, Rochdale. The Rochdalians are usually big in their numbers. And of course, everyone from Manchester and surrounding areas, our Manchester people. So thank you for today, for everyone, for this class. This was one of the classes we thought we'd, show the wider community what we kind of do. Like I said, you need to figure, it was a part of a journey that really this fits in with. Kamran is saying, so thank you, Kamran, for sharing. Can I just add, one of the great aspects of this class, or any that guidance point, is that they're really accessible and approachable in the key, and they open two-way communication, which is different from reading a book or learning online, where you just don't get the opportunity to see clarification, internalize, and make it individual to you. Yeah, this is not just the teachers or myself, or this is the team that, we always on hand, like Sister Farid said, the admin, we call them admin, I don't know what to call the volunteers, they just give their time and effort to help you, to help the students, to facilitate. Like I said, we take on the feedback, we try and put things on to make it more fun. I didn't do the Kahoot quiz today, I know, I deliberately missed it again. But next week, for our students, they can have the Kahoot quiz for a little revision session as well for what we've done. So we make it fun and interactive as much as we can, inshallah ta'ala, in order to benefit Muslims. Our goal is to benefit others, what we've learned to pass on, what the Prophet did, what the Sahaba did, what the Muslims have done. This is what we need for our future generations, for our younger generation as well. So thank you for today. That concludes what we'd intended to do today. As a final request, I would ask you to make dua for the team, people involved, not just in Manchester, but the work that we've been enabled to do has been from many people from around the UK. In fact, the classes started with Sheikh Yassine from Birmingham, who came to Dewsbury, to Manchester, and then back to Birmingham. And then, we had other teachers come up from Birmingham and other places to help, to teach, to support, to read the course material. So the course material is made from classical texts by the teachers into English, presented. Then the team do the design work and add the pictures and stuff in and stuff like that. So it's work in progress. We've had reviews of the booklets. We're always trying to improve them. Feedback is welcome. We do take on the feedback. We have actually, some of the booklets have been based on your feedback. We've changed them. We've added exercises in. We're trying to, some booklets are ahead of others in their, development. But we're trying, make dua for the team that puts all this effort in. And do dua for the online students. I've always encouraged guidance to do online. They don't want to do it. They will do it. Maybe they'll team up with somebody else who does the online aspect and have nice, crisp images like you have today, mashallah. It's been very different today, mashallah. But thank you to the team. Thank you to all of you, and take care. And we'll see you, or those of you in the classes, next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.